I wanted to show you guys some cool pictures that illustrate actual damage and ARPA things that I've worked on. You know, Samantha asked me to talk about like, what do we do in working with the stewards and in dealing with site damage? And so, you know, she asked me to talk about, well, how do we work with the site stewards? And unfortunately, not nearly as much as we want to. We often hear from the site stewards through the monitoring reports that they submit to Samantha. That's kind of our routine updates that we get, and she emails them to us and notes if there's anything that stands out that we should make sure to look at first, or questions that came up. And so we always look at the, Alicia, who's my colleague at the BLM in the office I work in, she and I always look at the reports and look at the photos and see what people have to say, and look at things that people are saying about kind of who's using the area and what else they're noticing out there that aren't site impacts. And so we don't get to see or interact with the stewards a whole lot beyond that. But then when there are impacts that we need to go to the field together and look at them, like we've certainly done that. We've done that with our regional coordinator, Jeff, probably the most. And then there are rare and wonderful times when we all go to the field just to look at sites and talk about them and have a field trip together. And that's really great. But what I've got up on the screen for you to see is an impact report that Jeff sent us about damage to a rock ring and some movement of rocks and, you know, some impacts to a site that's up in the Para area, which is a lot of rock art and rock rings. And so, you know, you can see Jeff's email in the corner there where he was letting us know, and the photos that he sent us. And it took us a while to get out there. But we did go out there with Jeff and with one of our law enforcement officers, and we took a lot of photos and we compared them to the old photos, and we tried to see what had moved and find some things that had moved and try to determine, are they gone? Are they just moved? Was this somebody taking things away? Was this somebody who didn't understand moving rocks around because they thought it was fun? Was this children? And obviously there's a lot you don't know. We did figure out there was some like rusty metal screen, like old window screen that's been out there for years. And that's what had left the red markings on the rocks. And that's one of the things that made us wonder, you know, who would do this? Why did they do it? And so we took all our notes and we took all our photos and we got the information we could, but there really wasn't anything there to help us start like a criminal investigation. There wasn't any good indication of who had been there. We didn't have very much information about, you know, why and what had really happened there. And so this is an example of something that, you know, we documented it. We were sad to see it happen, and, you know, we're interested in how that site progresses, but we haven't seen this damage happen again at this site. And so we don't really know what it means. And there was never really any finality or like sense of closure with this. And that unfortunately does happen pretty often. As you all know, you know, we live in a state with a lot of rural areas, and it can be hard to catch people. You know, Samantha's next question was, what do we do when we receive reports of damage like graffiti and looting, or what if fires go through? And, you know, when we first find out if somebody's telling us about it and we're not finding it, you know, we get all the information we can. We may talk to the stewards on the phone, you know, we read their reports, we may talk to Samantha. We run around the office trying to find people, because if we can catch our law enforcement officers, we'd rather just go talk to them and then send them the perfect email that says everything. So we go talk to them and see, can we go out in the field and look at it soon? When can we coordinate that? And it's not hard to get them interested in going out and looking at potential damage with us. Sometimes the shortage in time is from the archaeologists themselves, us, you know, having power lines and pipelines and roads and fiber optic lines and all the things that the public wants to get through the environmental permitting system. And that can take precedence, especially if we don't feel like the damage is ongoing or we don't feel like there's a whole lot we can do about it right then. The photos that you're seeing on the screen right now are from some of our wonderful site stewards up in the Para range, and somebody had like taken a rock and scratched a smiley face. I don't know if you can see it on that close-up photo, but they had scratched a smiley face onto a rock, and that's graffiti, and we're very interested in that. It's near a rock art site. It wasn't on any rock art. And you know, it will fade with time. We did not go out and investigate this in the field, and we aren't necessarily going to do anything. I don't know if there's anything we could do that wouldn't make it more stand out. Maybe we could brush it with a dry brush. But, you know, this is the kind of thing that we're very interested in knowing that it's happened, but we aren't necessarily going to be going out with law enforcement to look at it. Let's see. This is the Golden Gate Mill, and it's actually on BLM land just over into California that the Bishop Field Office manages. But at one point, a member of the public called me and had a lot of concerns that somebody had stolen one of the large metal objects that's associated with the mill that's around it. And this mill actually had restoration work done. You can see the tension. Somebody on this call, I'm sure, knows what those are called, but the tensioners that are helping hold things together, and there's some guy wires. And so they had actually gotten a Save America's Treasures grant, done some restoration work up here at this mill. But a man called me and said, I think that my neighbor down the street has stolen one of the big metal tanks and is going to make it into a barbecue grill. And he had all kinds of interesting information. And but he didn't want to tell me who he was, and he didn't want to tell me who his neighbor was. And so this is just a screenshot of some of my notes from the Word document that I'm typing crazily while he's talking to me, trying to take down everything I can, and, you know, where he thinks this thing has been moved to, and the welders that are working on it. And so Logan Briscoe, who's going to talk to you later, he and I went up there and we took lots of photos, and we tried to figure out if anything was missing. And, you know, we had a hard time telling. We went back and coordinated with their archaeologist over on Bishop, like, do you have other photos? There are no photos that show this object so that we can tell what's there and what's missing. And Logan tried to pursue it, and he worked with Forest Service and BLM law enforcement over in California to try to get some surveillance on it and find out more. But I don't know if they were ever actually able to get that individual to talk more, or to ever find out where that object may have gone. And I don't know if that's an ongoing investigation or if they weren't able to get any further with it.
Rachel, I'm going to interrupt just real quickly. Janice up there said with that smiley face rock that they piled a couple rocks on top of the smiley face.
Oh, yes, I remember that now, that is what they did. Thank you for doing that. I was going to say, oh, it was Janice Hoke and Carolyn Barnes, and I was like, maybe they don't want me to tell everybody what they're doing.
I think that's great because graffiti attracts graffiti. And so, you know, if it's not at the site itself.
Right. And so sort of just hiding it from people, I think that they made a really smart choice, because they're not creating additional impact, but they're making it so that maybe people won't notice it and add to it. And, you know, we always hope that our desert wind and rain and sun will take care of some of the lighter things like that happen. So we also have like hardcore criminal ARPA, and I've only worked on that some. Logan's worked on it a lot, and he'll talk to you about it. This is a montage of photos from the Poor Boy site, which is a site that was illegally excavated by an individual. These photos are from 2013, I think, and that gentleman was sentenced to jail in 2019. And probably has recently gotten out of jail. But so the initial impact to one site, and then law enforcement followed him, monitored him, took pictures of what he was doing, you know, tracked his car. We seized things from his house twice in a 6-year period. It was 7 years basically from the, I think, Fish and Wildlife, California Department of Fish and Wildlife guy, who is out and around a lot, just like our stewards are. And so noticed this repeat visitor and noticed this person doing strange things and started talking to other law enforcement about it. And, you know, so 7 years and hundreds of photos and hundreds of hours of surveillance to actually get a conviction. So this is archaeologists in the field doing the damage assessment, screening the leftover fill, and then filling back in holes and scattering vegetation over the site, doing the field damage assessments that we do. And I've promised Samantha I'm going to write her a blog post about that I haven't written. but at some point I will, where I talk about the work that Alicia and I have done in doing field level damage assessments like this. So this is a shot of, it's just a snapshot of some of the 300 projectile points that we had to identify, measure, and type from the third round of seizure from this person's home. And so one of the things that we have to do is make sense of what's there, because judges are going to ask us questions. How old are these? Well, how can you tell they're over 100 years old? Well, we can tell they're over 100 years old because it's an Elko-eared projectile point, and these were made in this time frame. And to do that, we have to identify them. And so Brian Hockett, who's our state lead archaeologist for BLM, he went through, he's an expert at projectile points. And so he did a lot of work to help me identify these. I can identify them in general, all the types, but there's some subtleties, especially with the broken ones, that Brian was really helpful with. So this is another thing that we do in the background, is we're in on a Saturday with calipers measuring all the projectile points and carefully resealing the evidence bag and maintaining the chain of custody and a lot of things that I never knew about before. So we also have damage to sites that, you know, isn't from criminal activity and isn't intentional, that's from fire. This is a picture from one of the big northern complex fires in the Virginia mountains. This is on Winnemucca Ranch Road up on the north end, where they had, you know, dropped retardant. You can see all along the road trying to keep the fire west of the road. And I'm driving up the road going, why am I going towards the big cloud of smoke going up? But that's because we often have archaeologists out on fires trying to track what the bulldozers are doing, let the fire personnel know of significant sites that need protection or avoidance, and just map dozer line and look at it and answer the questions. Did this dozer line go through significant sites if we weren't able to help them plan their dozer work ahead of time? So here's a NDF hand crew doing a backburn operation. This is the Earthstone fire. And Jeff will remember the Earthstone fire burned over the Paw-Raw Range, which is one of our big petroglyph areas that our site stewards work in. And this is east of that, heading over towards Nixon. And this is just bulldozers working. This is the Preacher Fire in the Pine Nut Mountains. It's the Story County dozer and another dozer, and I work with them a lot. It's good to know the dozer guys and have them be willing to have a good working relationship with you, because they do a lot to fight fire, but they also create a lot of impact in their work. So after the Earthstone fire, Jeff Thielen sent me photos of, you know, retardant. It got dropped on petroglyphs. And so that's an impact. But then the question is, well, what do we do? How much of an impact is it? Like, should we go wash it off? Like, do we need to call everybody? Are they, you know, petroglyphs ruined for good? And here's just some shots of emails, because there's a lot of emailing that goes on, where we sort of start reaching out and we start trying to read the research that's out there. You know, what is the effect of this retardant? What's it going to do? Is it going to eat away at the rock surface? And in the instance of the Paw-Raw petroglyphs and the retardant out there, all the research that we found was basically that the heat and the spalling of rock from when bushes burn right up next to rock and it's really hot and the rock actually, you know, spalls and breaks off, that is a far greater threat to rock art and sites like that than the retardant. And, you know, we found, like, we've got the, you know, the material safety data sheet for the FOS check for the retardant, trying to figure out what's it made of, what's its pH, what do we think it's going to do. And then we went and asked all the fire guys, how fast does this stuff come off? What do you think, you know, do you think it's ever going to wash off? Will it be there in 50 years? And what we found was that if you get some rain and you get some sun and you get some wind, it should wear off. And we decided that we didn't want to scrub or aggressively try to wash the petroglyphs, especially knowing that they maybe had been subjected to heat. And so we left them alone in that case. And so there's a lot of times where we spend a lot of time thinking, talking, and planning about things, but then you may not see us do anything, because sometimes we're not sure that what we would do is better than leaving it alone. So lots of emailing. I'll go back to a cool fire picture. But one of the things that we did do during the Earthstone fire, I was out there, and so was Alice Brannigan, who's another archaeologist. is we called Jeff and we called Samantha and we talked to them. And of course we talked to the tribes that take interest in areas, and we stay in contact with them through fires, and we talk to them when there are impacts too, a lot of the time. Just trying to maintain that communication with people who know about and care about the areas we're in, and then make plans for what we're going to do afterwards. So that is about all I have to say about that, because the ARPA details, Logan does a far better job of talking about than I do, and he has cool pictures and cop secrets and stuff. So I will stop and take questions, or if Samantha and Rant, there's something you hoped I would talk about that I didn't, please let me know.
Okay, if anybody has any questions, go ahead and type them in the question and answer, and I'll read them out to Rachel. I have a question, Rachel. When it comes to you working on fires, like what percentage of your time do you think you spend out when there's wildfires?
It depends on the year. Every answer I ever give is it depends. In the last 2 summers, I have not worked fire. It's incredibly arduous. And being out on the fire line, but Alice Brannigan has gone out for us, and then Jason Wright, who's another archaeologist in our office, does. It kind of depends on how willing you are and how much your boss agrees to spare you. On our field office, I typically spent 2 to 3 weeks every summer on fire, and that's physically being on the fires. And then that generates another 3 to 4 weeks at least of office work dealing with the documentation once you get back in.
So that could take
a district, like Jason will go work at least a month out of every year on California fires because they always need archaeologists.
Yeah, that just illustrates how important it is to have the site stewards, because if you are taken away on fire, then Jeff can help, and because he's your regional coordinator, and then those monitoring reports are that much more important.
So. Oh my gosh, yes, they're so important. And yeah, we're being pulled in so many directions, and it keeps us from actually spending time with the site. So our stewards are priceless.
Okay, and we just had a comment that said, just want to thank you for sharing the information, and we haven't gotten any other questions. So thank you, Rachel.
Okay, well then I'll quit talking in a moment, but then I just remembered, I'm looking at my notes. Samantha wanted me to talk a little bit about like how long it takes from when we find out there's been damage to, you know, when, like maybe when it gets investigated, when it enters a legal system. And I think I covered that some talking about that ARPA case that took 7 years, but Logan will talk about that some. A lot of that has to do with their ability to get warrants, and then our ability to find out enough information to start building a case and like building momentum to get other people on board to putting staff time and money into it for several years to come.
Another comment, just thank you for the info on the retardant and the rock art, and that spalling is a real issue for sure. That's a statewide issue with the retardant on rock art. It happens down in Southern Nevada too. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Okay, I will stop sharing my screen.